Every war has its heroes, but every war also has its winners. And that winner is not the soldier on the battlefield, it's the bank. America realized this earlier than anyone else, because wars aren't won only with blood, they're won with money, and that money still comes out of your pocket. How? Grab your coffee and sit back. Let's take a look behind the curtain together. The real face of war. History books love to tell stories of glory, of bravery, sacrifice, and freedom. But behind every war, there's another kind of battle, a financial one. Every bomb is a bill. Every bullet is a bond. While some lose everything, others always profit. America saw this early on, and from that day forward, war wasn't just about defense. It was an investment opportunity. But this system didn't appear overnight. It took shape slowly in the middle of crisis, and its first real step was taken in 1914 during the First World War. 1914, the Great War, the Great Opportunity. When World War I began, America stood on the sidelines, but Europe was bleeding itself dry. Britain, France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, all were losing men and money at the same time. While millions fought in the trenches, their governments were running out of cash. Guns, food, coal, fuel, everything cost money. And across the ocean, one nation was watching carefully: America. Officially neutral, but in reality becoming the supplier of the world. On Wall Street, the biggest deals in history were being made. J.P. Morgan signed billion-dollar credit agreements with Britain and France. American factories sent steel, coal, munitions, and grain across the Atlantic. Every shipload of goods was a loan with interest. Every artillery shell an investment return. America was profiting from the war long before it ever joined it. And that's when the pattern began: borrow to fight and grow through war. 1917. A war financed by the people. By 1917, America could no longer remain neutral. But in truth, it was already deeply involved. Not on the battlefield, but on the balance sheet. Britain and France owed so much money that if they lost, Wall Street would collapse with them. So America had to make sure they won, for its own financial survival. That's when the government brought the public into the game. Liberty bonds hit the market. Posters of Uncle Sam pointed at citizens. "I want you." The message was everywhere. If you love your country, lend it your money. Millions of Americans invested their savings. Even children traded their piggy bank coins for thrift stamps. For the first time in history, an entire nation was mobilized, not just for war, but for finance. But the real winners weren't the citizens. They were the banks running the system. J.P. Morgan and the financial giants lent to the government and earned again by selling those same bonds to the public. Hidden inside every bullet was an interest payment. When the war ended, America emerged not just as a military power, but as the new financial center of the world. 1939. The system was ready. 20 years passed. Europe burned again. When World War II began, America wasted no time. President Roosevelt declared, "America will be the arsenal of democracy." Factories roared to life, mines were full, and the bond system was already in place. Once again, America profited long before it fought. Britain and France borrowed, and Wall Street opened its doors once more. This time the numbers were even bigger. Hollywood joined the campaign. Movie stars sold war bonds on the streets and over the radio. 85 million Americans, 2 out of every 3 citizens, bought bonds. They raised over $185 billion, more than half the cost of the entire war. America was financing the war with the people's debt, and behind it, all stood one quiet institution, the Federal Reserve. It bought treasury bonds, printed money, and kept the economy running. That invisible engine powered both the battlefield and the home front. When the war ended, America wasn't just victorious, it had become the banker of the world. 1944, Bretton Woods and the rise of the dollar. Europe lay in ruins. Cities were rubble, economies destroyed. But America's factories were still busy, and its vaults were full of gold. That year, in a small town in New Hampshire, world leaders met at the Bretton Woods Conference. Their decision changed global finance forever. Every major currency would be tied to the US dollar, and the dollar would be tied to gold. But 2/3 of the world's gold was already in American hands. That meant the dollar wasn't just strong, it was central. From then on, world trade and investment would flow through Washington and Wall Street. America's victory wasn't only military, it was financial. Europe's collapse became America's rise. Every loan, every treaty, every debt made the U.S. richer and more indispensable. The dollar was now backed by something far stronger than gold: trust. The Cold War. Keeping the engine running. When the war ended, America's economy was built entirely around war production. Peace created a new problem. What now? Millions of soldiers came home. Factories had nothing left to make. Then a new enemy appeared. The Soviet Union, a threat that could last forever. For America, that was the perfect fuel. Economists even gave it a name: military Keynesianism. The idea was simple: keep the economy alive through constant defense spending. Missiles, jets, nuclear programs, each project worth billions. The defense industry became a permanent engine. Budgets grew, corporations expanded, and war turned into business as usual. But no machine runs forever. By the late 1960s, the system began to crack. And the reason was Vietnam. Vietnam, guns and butter. The Vietnam War was a disaster, militarily and economically. President Lyndon Johnson tried to fight a war while also funding his Great Society programs. But money doesn't stretch that far. To cover the costs, the government issued more bonds. The Fed printed more money. Inflation rose and faith in the dollar fell. European countries began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars. America's gold reserves started to vanish. Then came 1971. President Richard Nixon went on television and said one line that changed financial history forever: the dollar will no longer be convertible into gold. The gold standard was gone. From that moment on, money was no longer backed by metal, only by trust. And that trust rested on one thing: America's military and economic power. In short, money was now backed by force. The petrodollar, a new weapon. Gold was gone, but the system needed a new anchor. And soon it found one: oil. In the mid-1970s, the U.S. struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. Oil would be sold only in U.S. dollars. From that day forward, any country that wanted oil first needed dollars. That deal turned the dollar into America's new weapon. The more oil the world bought, the more dollars it needed, and the more the U.S. could borrow. Wars seemed to end, but the empire's power now flowed through energy, not armies. The petrodollar gave America a financial army of its own: banks instead of soldiers, bonds instead of bullets. And that system still runs today. 1991, the Gulf War. Live-streamed profits. By 1991, the world had changed again. The Cold War was over. The Soviet Union was gone. But the war economy wasn't. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, oil was once again at risk. America stepped in to protect the global order. The Gulf War became the first conflict broadcast live on TV. But those broadcasts weren't just showing missiles, they were showing products. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and General Dynamics used the war as a stage. Smart bombs, guided missiles, stealth jets. Each one a commercial in disguise. The war lasted only weeks, but the market reaction lasted for years. Defense stocks soared. War had officially become a marketing campaign. 9/11, the War on Terror. Then came 2001. The 9/11 attack shook America and reignited the engine. Under the banner of the War on Terror, the U.S. invaded Afghanistan, then Iraq. 2 decades of war cost over $6 trillion. Where did all that money go? To the same names as always: Lockheed Martin, Halliburton, Raytheon, and the banks behind them. The government issued bonds, the Fed bought them, money was printed, and the cycle repeated. And just like that, war became endless, an open-ended source of debt and profit. America might not have won those wars, but the system did. Because the real victory wasn't on the battlefield, it was in the balance sheets. 2008, the financial war without bullets. Then came 2008. This time, the war wasn't fought with tanks. It was fought in spreadsheets. The financial system collapsed, banks fell apart, and once again the government stepped in. Trillions were printed, rates were slashed, markets were rescued. There was no war, but the reflex was the same. Borrow now, pay later. The 2008 crisis proved something powerful. The war economy could run even in peacetime. You didn't need soldiers anymore. All you needed was a crisis. Crisis had become the new war. 2020, the invisible battlefield. Then came 2020. The enemy wasn't a nation this time. It was a virus. But the reaction was identical. Governments printed trillions. Central banks flooded the markets. Relief packages rolled out. And just like before, most of that money went to the top. Corporations grew, stocks soared. Ordinary people left fighting inflation. Even without a war, the war economy was alive and well. The tanks were gone, but the spreadsheets kept fighting. Every crisis birthed another wave of debt, the endless loop. Look around today, the system hasn't changed. Every crisis, every threat, every emergency turns into an opportunity. Governments borrow, the Fed prints, corporations profit, and in the end, the people pay. War isn't far away anymore. It's in your bills, your groceries, your taxes, because this system survives on every dollar you spend. And the irony? America doesn't even have to win these wars, it just has to keep them going, because the goal isn't victory, it's continuity. Final words. Seeing the truth. History books tell you why wars begin, but they rarely tell you who profits. The truth is simple. Every war, every crisis, every threat creates new economic opportunity. Money and power are no longer separate. They are one and the same. And this system will keep running as long as you don't see it for what it is. That's why history matters. Not because it repeats word for word, but because it whispers. War doesn't only happen on the battlefield. It happens in balance sheets and in silence. If this story gave you a new way to see things, hit like, subscribe, and remember. Real financial awareness begins when you understand how the system truly works.